Hello, Ken Spriggs here, starting a new commission build for a client. And we had talked about this late last year, actually probably like October, November. And someone had approached me after seeing some of my Facebook builds or posts and had asked if I would do a commission build for them. And they want me to build the large Moebius EVA pod. So a couple of reasons I decided to go ahead and take this on. One, I have not built that kit yet, and I actually have my own version of it, my own model kit that I got, and I haven't built. But secondly, the reason I hadn't really built it is because I had looked around and I was kind of overwhelmed by the very large amount of aftermarket sets and parts and things that are available for this kit to make it look realistic, especially when it comes to lighting up the controls and things like that. You can get really advanced in this. There are working displays, opening doors, modifications to the claws, things like that, 3D figures that you can print out and put inside. So what I decided to do, and one of the main reasons that I wanted to go with this, is that first of all, I can light up the interior without using a lot of the more complex aftermarket sets or more complex approaches, such as different colored SMDs and lights and things like that. And I'll kind of show you that as I go and work through the project. Secondly, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to build two of these, one for myself, one for the client, which obviously at the end, one of the benefits is that I will have my own kit built at the same time, and I'll benefit from what do they call that? From scale or whatever they call that. I can't just tongue-tied on it. Basically, that if you're doing two things at the same time, it's just as easy to paint this whole thing black as it is to paint this other one all black. Or once I hash out the lights and the light boxes, economy of scale, that's what it is. I knew I'd get it in a second. It's easier to do two of the same thing at the same time, and it doesn't take that much more time. Now, the second benefit is that I can test out the ideas, and pretty much this video is me testing out how to light the controls inside the cabin. And so I start with working on the one version, the one that's going to be mine. And then as I hash that out and I get it perfected, I use the better techniques on the second one, which is going to be the client's. So I'm going to do that throughout the process. So he's going to benefit from me learning from the first one and learning from mistakes and having to do it again and working through and finalizing how it's going to work. So in the end, he's going to have the best version. Mine's still going to be pretty awesome, but you know, if I make some mistakes or if I have to learn from the first one, that'll be mine. So, all right. So let's go ahead and one other thing, I am going to be using 3D printed figures, which I've started to print out of a seated Dave inside. And then I'm also going to have a Frank in the claws for mine. The client isn't going to have that. He's just going to have Dave inside of it. So, all right, let's go ahead and take a look. All right, so I'm beginning to paint the interior of the pod. I'm working on the bottom of the control section. And you have to build from the inside out because everything has to go together and completely get encapsulated, including the figure that I'll be using, and I'll be painting him too. And then everything else builds around it till the final shell goes on at the end. So what I'm using here, there are several available aftermarket sets that you can use to try to paint the interior and have the controls lit. And I've looked at a few of them. Like one of them is a vinyl set that you put down the vinyl and it stays there, and then it has the buttons cut out. Another is photo etch from Paragraphics, where you paint that it fits over the controls, and then they're opened as well. And then this approach by Lou Dalmasso from Aztek Dummy, his mask set, I think his is the best approach. What he's done is, because you're basically just painting this all black. All these controls are black. And then he has a bunch of little squares for the buttons. So you cover all the buttons. Now the nice thing about his approach is that you can leave enough space in between the buttons, and they're designed to be a little smaller than the actual buttons. So when you paint it, you're going to get the paint in between the buttons, so they have distinct buttons and not just one big square that's all one color. That's not going to look right. And then once that's on, which I've already finished this part, you just spray it down with some flat black, let that dry, make sure it's nicely masked, and then you take off the masks, and then underneath you can put your lights to glow through the white plastic. So I'm going to be using Krylon's flat black, which I really like. I've had a lot of good success with it. It's almost a little bit of a satin versus a flat black. It's just a little bit of a sheen, which I think would be nice on these controls anyway. So this is all masked off, and I'm also looking at the instructions from the Moebius kit to get an idea of where, you know, which parts are lit and which parts are not, because I wasn't sure about these little squares, but they're showing them as just black. So I'm just leaving these squares right here as black. I don't know what those are, but we're going to leave them alone. And everything else should be masked off correctly to be able to let light through. I'm glad I looked, because those little red ones in the middle, I wasn't really noticing those, and so I want to make sure those are masked off as well. And it's cool too, the instructions give you the colors, so you have like the green, yellow, blue, red, as far as what those are going to be. And I will get those colors using some clear Tamiya paints. So I'm also looking at Lou's instructions, and I was wondering if it would be better to put everything together as far as all the walls and then paint it. But what I'm going to try to do is some sub-assemblies. So the bottom part is one big piece. I'm going to do that first. Then you have the walls that come around and meet in his two sides. And I think I'll do those separate, and he kind of shows that here. You can see he has a whole section glued together. And here's how it looks after you take the mask off. So I'm going to do that. So I'm going to have the whole side parts all together, with the exception of the two big back parts. And I'll do those separately as well. And some of those are going to have to be modified in order to be able to get some lights up in there and do that as well. In fact, let me take a look, because I might have to do that on this one before I go ahead and paint it. Let me go ahead and take a look at those. All right, yes, so I do remember now, because watching Lou's video, he did have to do a little bit of modification. So when this back part is on, right there, you need to be able to light up, sorry, you need to be able to put a light behind this little opening. That's a red glowing light. And if you put it on the kit, well, basically this part right here is going to be in the way, and over here too. If you want to have a light box underneath, that's going to be very tricky underneath that. So he just went ahead and cut those off. So let me do that first. Let me just cut those off with my Dremel and a cutting wheel. That way it'll be easy to do that before I go ahead and get it all painted. All right, so as you saw from the previous stills, I put the masks on, and I went ahead and put down the Krylon flat black, which actually comes out to be more of like a satiny look, which I really like a lot. I had to put down 2 coats onto it in order to get some good coverage, and basically just put some light through it and see how it's light blocking the buttons. So what I want to try to do is go ahead and work on the second control panel for the second kit. And I'm going to try using some silver first and then some black, and see if that goes on a little better and has a little better coverage. Because the silver is a little thinner when it applies down than the flat black, but it also blocks pretty well since it's metallic. So let me go ahead and give that a try. right, and here is the panel with the silver and the black, and I removed all the masks from it, and looking pretty cool. I really like the separation of the buttons, and you can see the black between them, and it makes them look like individual buttons, which turned out to be exactly the way I wanted. Really cool. So let me go ahead and put a light behind one of these and show you how that's going to look with some light strip. All right, and here's just a little test. All I did was tape some of the strip lights, as you can see here, underneath the buttons. So they're coming through pretty nicely. They look a little more on the warm white side in the video. They're a little more on the cool white in real life. But again, once I get a light box in place and that concentrates that light, it'll be brighter. But it's coming through pretty nicely, as you can see. And it actually kind of comes down here a little bit too. So I'll have to figure out how to make like maybe a strip for here, a strip for here, that kind of thing. 2 strips along here. But it's going to work really nicely, and I love the separation between the buttons. I think that's the key to this, to look more realistic and look like they're actual buttons. So, all right. So fantastic. Really happy with how that turned out, and I'm working on some other ideas on how to do some colors for those. All right, so I know I said earlier in the video that I was thinking about using Tamiya color paints. And my original idea was to paint the buttons with clear Tamiyas and put different colors onto them. But looking at the footage from the movie, and I watched the scenes a couple of times with him in the pod, and there are a couple scenes where he has, there's a straight over shot of all the controls, and it looks really cool. So you can get a good idea about it. And I'll show some stills here in a moment. What it looks like is that these buttons, obviously when he presses them, they light up. There's a light in them. And when they're turned off, you don't see them. They're just dark. But they don't look like clear buttons where you would have like a clear red plastic and then a light in it. They look more like the plastic itself is kind of not really opaque, but translucent. And it is, it's the color. The plastic is the color. So it's not really vibrant. It's more of a paler kind of a color. So what I decided to do, since these are in fact plastic controls, I can get that effect by putting color underneath it and shining up through it with just the clear white light. So what I got were these, I got this assortment pack from Evergreen Scale Models of 5 different sheets that are clear colored. We have red, blue, green, yellow, and then we have black, which is the UV light blocking plastic, which I've used before. And here they are. And all they are is just thin plastic sheets, and they are the .010 thickness, so they're very thin. You can cut it with scissors. And then you have your green, you have your blue. These are nice vibrant colors. And you have your yellow. And then you have the black. The black is just UV light resistant, but it blocks light. So that's nice to use if you want to block something off. And I may possibly use some little bits of that for certain buttons that I want to just be dark and not lit up. So if I used it on the back, like you can see here, I taped some of the plastic on here. You could put black in just a few spots to blacken out some buttons. But let me go ahead and get a light on this, and I'll show you how that's going to look. All right, so I'm gonna do a little light test. So I have just a little strip of lights in one of these clamshell holders. And on the bottom, underneath, I have just taped on some red, blue, yellow, and green of the, styrene, colored styrene. So let me go ahead and put that light through them. So over here we have red, and it's uneven. Just keep in mind, I have to put light boxes in there and get the right distance and all that, but you have the red over here. You have the blue and yellow in the center, looking pretty cool. And then over here we have the green. All right. So it'll work nice and cool, and actually doubled them up so they were a little thicker and had a little a little more of the rich color. And I can play with that as well. And each of these can be cut to match the size of the particular switches and controls that it needs to light up. So, okay, but that'll look pretty cool. All right, now I want to do a little bit closer view of this so you can get a better idea of the colors because they look pretty cool. So there is the blue and yellow. And as I move the light around, you can see that certainly distance makes an important difference in how the light looks or how you have hot spots or diffusion, but that looks pretty cool. And then over here, we have the red. Red is often difficult to show in a video. It doesn't want to look red, but that's pretty good looking red. And then over here, we have the green. This looks pretty cool. And then, of course, if I just do white buttons, some of them are going to be that, I believe. They look a lot brighter. So if you have these two together, the white are going to look a lot brighter than the green. And again, I can move that back and get a little better look so it doesn't wash it out quite as much. So, okay. But definitely a good concept. I think it's going to work really well for what I want to do. All right, so here are some stills from the film, and you can get an idea of the buttons. And some of them are really bright, and some of them are much more dim. So here's a better picture. The ones by his hands, you can see up a little bit, the really bright that are almost like a warm white, compared to the yellow that are right below them. And I'll show you a closer picture. So there's a closer one. So you can see how bright those ones are, but you can see the blue is rather kind of a pale blue. The green is a pale blue, green. The red is the same. Here's an image of them in the pod talking. And you can see without the displays turned on, the same buttons and how they look. So that's kind of the look that I'm going for. I began working on a light box to do a test because I have to determine how far away from the buttons I want the lights to be. I just kind of guessed right here, but if this is wrong, I can always cut down this height of it so it's closer. But I don't think it'll be much higher or further out than that. So what I did was I took some tape and I put it on the inside of the part and just traced around it and cut it out. I don't need the entire part lit up, so I cut out a little part right there. And then I just took some stripping and cut it and glued it around. Now, little caution to myself and to others. Be sure you're gluing on the right side, because in the end, that part isn't going to fit over here. Now, luckily, it fits the opposite over here because I just flipped it. Let me put it on there and I'll show you. All right, there you go. So originally I traced this side over here, which they're the same general shape. But when I glued on the stripping, I should have glued it on the other side so it's flipped over and reversed, but it's no big deal. That'll work over there. So then what I can do is just trace that same shape for the other side again, because they're the same, and then just glue the stripping on the other side, obviously. Now, I don't know, I mean, we'll see. I might leave that opening there in order to bring the wiring out. I don't think I need anything. Well, I'll probably put a piece on that inner edge as well, just to keep it nice and blocked in. And then I'm working out a way to put 2 strips of LED tape inside each of these to give enough light for the different sections. So let me keep working on that. All right, there's the first test. It's not too shabby. The buttons down here in the end aren't getting as much light, but that might not be able to be helped. Hopefully once I get some light blocking and paint this black on the back, it'll help a bit. I get that snugged in. Let me turn off that light and I'll show you how it looks without the light on. All right, so definitely brighter. The buttons are still distinct, and the camera does tend to wash it out just a little. But I might play with it. I can probably go a little bit closer, which I would benefit from more light. Now the thing of it is, I'm going to have one other strip in there. Let me show you. I just have one strip. That's really bright, sorry. You can see that one strip right there. And so I'm going to have another one over here, which is going to bring more brightness. It won't bring more to the back, but it'll still be a contained light box. So once I get it painted black, it may do what I want it to do as far as having the correct brightness. So let me play with that just a little bit more. All right, so I went ahead and I put in 2 strips at first. This strip right here, and then this one over here. And there's wires. You can't see them because they're underneath this 3rd strip, which I added. But the wires connect, and then they obviously come out this way to one wire. Now, I wasn't getting a lot of light into... Let me just make sure I'm looking at the right side here, right over here. So that bottom strip right there, it's just butt up against that part of the model. You can see right there, that line. And that little teeny one too. So, and plus that comes to a little sharp corner, so it was really hard to get some light back in there. The other ones over here are pretty open, pretty easy to get to. So I went ahead and I added this 3rd strip, and I cut off the edge of it so it would be flush with this. And you can see that it kind of overlaps. There's actually an SMD underneath, but that's not a problem because the ones on top are lighting it up. So I took that and I wired that. You can see this wire coming back into this connection, which is coming out of the light box. And I also did trim down the edge of it. I made it thinner so it was closer to the controls, just to get a little brighter light. And the nice thing is, because these buttons are plastic, they're not clear, you're not really getting any hot spots. So let me go ahead and put this in. Oh, and I did put some aluminum foil over top of it to light block it. Keep the light inside and contained and channeled. All right, so let me go ahead and put this into the bottom of the controls, and I'll show you how that's going to look. All right, and there's the light box behind it, and the battery, or the buttons, the controls glowing. They look more washed out in the camera, but they look really nice and crisp and individual in real life. This is at 12 volts. These are rated from 9 to 12 volts. Sorry for shaking this. The only thing that concerns me a little bit about the 12 volts is that they're a little warm. Now they're rated for that, so I don't think it's a real problem or a real issue. And they're inside the light box, which has the metal foil on it. So I'm able to hold it right here. It's not that warm, obviously, but just feels a little bit warm. So, but I do trust that that's what they're rated. I think also once I get a whole lot more of them all running off the same power source, they're not going to be pulling that much juice. Right now it's only the two strips right now. So all right, so so that concept looks like it's going to work. It looks like that's the right distance that I need to be. If I want them to be brighter, I can move them closer for certain ones. The only one that didn't light up is that little teeny one right here. It looks a little more lit, but you can see it's darker. So what I'm going to do is leave that one as if it's turned off, because it's such an odd place. It's hard to get a light in it, but the rest of it looks fairly even. Over here, we don't have that same problem. It's mostly because you have those right butt up against that wall, which is really hard to get them in. This one's going to be similar with all of those ones there, but then hopefully I can get that working. I'm thinking like one strip there and then one strip on the outside. So we'll see. We'll get that worked out. But let me go ahead and get some of the colored styrene in there, and we'll see how that looks. All right, so I cut some pieces of the green and the yellow clear styrene, because on this side, on these controls that I'm lighting up, the only the front one is yellow. All the rest of the back ones are green. So I took some of that. I used some UV activated, well, it's basically resin, but they call it liquid plastic adhesive. And I used my UV light that I used to harden my 3D printed models. And I went ahead and just tacked around the edges. So I have the yellow in the front, I have the green in the back. And I did put in anything over that little teeny square down there in the middle, the one that doesn't light up very well. I'm just going to leave that alone. And it might have a faint glow, but it's going to be one of the buttons that's turned off. All right, so that's dried now. I hit it with the UV light. Let me go ahead and put the light on there, and we'll see what that looks like with the color. All right, so there we go. Now, I turned it down to 9 volts because it was really washing out in the camera. So right now, this looks too dim to me, but at 12 volts, it looks really good. So we have the green down here, and we have the yellow up here on the front. And like I said, they don't look as bright in the camera as they do in real life. Sorry about that. Hair on there. But they are doing what they need to do. And the thing of it is, and the thing I have to keep remembering is, there's a ton of lights. So not only just, this is just the base, then you have the 2 wraparound walls on either side that are just flooded with lights. There's going to be lights over this entire thing. So in the end, you know, these might look just plain because you just have green and yellow, but that's the proper colors they're supposed to be. And once I get all the rest of them with the blue and the red, and then you have the other lights within the pod, it's all going to go together, and you're going to have these displays lit up and some more displays. So that's going to be what I want it to be, and that looks pretty cool. Plus, I still have to put the decals on here, which are going to give it some more dimension, a little bit of writing on it, some outlines around the buttons, that sort of thing. So, okay, but looking really good. So I think I'll try one more box right there in the middle. That one's pretty easy since it's just basically a rectangle. And then we'll see if we can get this to start looking pretty cool. All right, one more thing I did. I went back and I put another layer of the green and the yellow under the buttons to make them a deeper color. You can tell that that's yellow. You can tell that that's green. It's not as washed out in real life. The buttons are nice and distinct. And in addition, they're a nice color of green and yellow. I did put green behind that little single button that doesn't light up very well, because it is still a green button, it just isn't lit up. So it's a little darker, it's a little dimmer than the other ones, but it would still be green, even if it didn't get pressed on. Because the idea, from what I can tell from the film, the buttons are colored plastic and there's just a light behind them. And when you press the button, it lights up, and then that's the color that you see. So, okay. All right, so I got the light box prepared for the controls right here. I put a little piece of tape, some foil tape over that little hole like that one there, because there's some light leaking through. And I just didn't want to have it mess up the image that I'm showing when I light this up. All right, so I also went ahead and glued on the colored styrene. Now this time, I don't know what I was thinking. I didn't need to use UV glue. I might tear those back off, because see how thick that is? It's in little bubbles, and it does kind of get in the way of the light box. So all I had to use was some of my plastic bonding, because I'm just gluing plastic styrene onto styrene kit. So that worked just fine. And I have obviously the blue for the blue buttons and the red in between for the little red squares. All right, let me go ahead and put that light box on and I'll show you how that's going to look. All right, and there's the red and blue controls, looking really cool. And again, I have this down to 9 volts, so it's a little dimmer for me, but it doesn't get washed out as much in the camera. But it looks really nice and clean, a nice red for those little red sections, a nice blue, pale blue for the blue buttons. All right, so looking really, really cool. So let me go ahead and try to get the other section in and kind of see those two together. All right, there we go. So I have the blue controls, the red panels. I have the yellow over here, the green back in the back. Let's see if I can get a little better. There you go. You can make that out a little bit better. They're much more distinctive colors, especially the yellow, the red are much deeper red. The green and the blue looks really cool too and distinct as well. So, all right, very cool. A little bit of touch up here and there around some of the buttons, and I still have to do the controls, as I said. So I just have to do one more side over here and replicate the side that I did over here, and then I'll have this whole bottom section with the lid controls. And then from there I can start working on the side walls. All right, let me turn off the lights and see if I can get a little bit of a better view of that. All right, and you're getting some backlight, of course, coming down from the bottom because those aren't totally sealed in place. But you can definitely make out that those are yellow, those are green, and then we have the blue and the red. Pay no attention to that little thing. That's just one of the holes where one of the controls goes into, and it's just light coming through there for now. So I wish the red would show up more distinct as what it really is. Let me see if I can get closer and see if I can get it better. That's kind of, I know it's all blurred out, but that's kind of how it looks. The light keeps wanting to focus. Let me see if I can get in closer. No. See, the problem is it's picking up other light around it. Sorry. So it doesn't want to look at the right colors. But when I get in really close and I know it looks kind of blurred, that's how they look right there. Just not blurry. But that's how bright the red is and how distinct it looks. The blue looks like that. It's nice and pale. There's the yellow. Yellow comes through pretty good on the camera. And the green as well. There we go. That's how those look. All right, so very cool. All right, there we go. So all of the controls are lit up. We've got the yellow one here. Those are all green. We've got the blue and red in the front. We have yellow over here. Some more yellow in those 4 right there, and then the rest are green. All right, so again, they're not showing up the way they really are in real life because the colors are much more vibrant. The camera just adjusts for it. Let me turn the light off and I'll get a little better view of those. All right, so there it is without the light on. It's still hard to capture how these colors look. Let me turn it down from 12 volts to 9 volts and see if it looks a little closer to the real colors. All right, so maybe just a little less washed out, but they're still looking pretty good. The green and yellow look pretty close on camera to what they really look like. Red and blue's a lot harder. That's better. That looks a lot more like what it's supposed to look like right there. Only it's brighter in real life, and especially when I have it on for, yeah, you see how when I pull back, it wants to adjust that red to an orange, which it is not orange at all. It's red. It's a nice deep red. All right, so looking pretty cool. So those aren't permanently attached, but I basically was just working to figure out how far away I wanted these to be, get the light boxes set up, and just figure out how I can get them to look realistic. Oh, sorry, the cord fell down. But looking pretty cool. Sorry. All right. And then these ones will all be pretty much the same brightness, except for the ones that aren't lit or aren't getting enough light. And then you'll see a couple random ones doing that. Once I start on the side walls, there are going to be some that are going to be much brighter. And so I'm not going to have any color behind them. They're more of a warm white. And then I will have the SMD really close, the light strips really close to them so they look brighter. So I will show you that when I start working on those. But definitely got a good proof of concept here. Figured out how I wanted to go about doing these. And then I can just repeat the process on the majority of the ships. So, all right. All right, so there's a little better view, and I put the light back on so you can kind of see the green and the yellow. The red and the blue are turning out really nicely in the camera. Some more yellow over there, and then green over here. All right, so looking pretty cool. And again, this is at 9 volt. When I turn it up to 12 volt, they're much brighter in person. But this helps to look better on the camera. So, all right, fantastic. All right, fantastic. So a lot of progress done. The main part that I wanted to accomplish, I did accomplish. I wanted to figure out how to use a pretty simple approach to lighting the controls inside of the cabin. And rather than using a bunch of different color SMDs or LEDs, I was able to just use some regular cool white standard light strips. And then using the technique with the different colors, the red, green, yellow, blue of the clear styrene, and then using the Aztek Dummy painting mask set, I think I came out with a really accurate looking portrayal of how those buttons are supposed to look. And then when everything is all together and you have all the wraparound buttons and the red lights coming down from the other part and the lights in the back, it's all going to come together and look pretty awesome and pretty sweet. So, okay, well, thank you to my all my new subscribers. I will be continuing this build. I'll also be continuing working on the buddy build with Tim on the ATST, and I have some progress on that as well. So hopefully we'll have some video on that coming soon. And I'm going to have another short-term commission coming up here shortly that I'll talk about here once I get in the parts that I need and start working on that. That's going to be a pretty simple one. So, all right. Well, thank you, everybody, and I will see you in the next video.